Continuamos entonces con nuestra próxima conferencia. Debemos tener por aquí a Jesse. Ah, qué bueno, Jesse. Y allá nos ayuda Ronnie con la presentación de Jesse de Santo Domingo, coinage of 1897, the beginning of dollars diplomacy in the Dominican Republic. Ronnie, ¿alguien que me ayude con Ronnie arriba? Ok. Mientras, ¿puedes hablar algo?
En español, sí, así.
No, in English and Spanish.
Yeah, yeah, sí.
Okay. Begin, please.
Need,
Yes, we need to for sure. You can speak.
yes, perfect. Gracias.
Mira. This is for the point. Okay, así. And avanzar. Retroceder.
Gracias.
Dame decirle en español. La moneda de Santo Domingo en 1897. El inicio de la diplomacia del dólar en la República Dominicana. Con ustedes, Jesse Kraft.
Muchas gracias. Lo siento, yo comprendo español así, más o menos, pero no hablo muy bien. So I'm going to speak in Spanish, or in English rather. Again, my apologies. My presentation is entitled La Moneda de Santo Domingo in 1897, Inicio de la Diplomacia del Dólar en República Dominicana, or the San Domingo coinage of 1897, the beginning of dollar diplomacy in the Dominican Republic. I'm trying to get, I do have that. All right. I'm very aware of the irony of me talking about dollar diplomacy in Latin America and having to come down here and speak in English. So again, I apologize. It's not necessarily the most perfect thing in the world, but I'll just get right to it. I do have my slides both in English and Spanish, for Spanish first and then English, so that everyone may follow along. Okay. Like much of the world's money, the coinage of the Dominican Republic modernized throughout the course of the 19th century. Older techniques of manufacture were replaced with modern methods of steam and hydraulic powered presses. No longer were coins misshapen or varied in weight, but were perfectly round and uniform from one to the next. No region in the world is this modernization more apparent than in the coinage of Latin America, and in particular the West Indies. In the case of the Dominican Republic, to a large degree, this transformation was completely out of control of government officials. Throughout the course of the 19th century, as the Dominican Republic gained and regained independence from France, Spain, and Haiti, the country attempted to stabilize its monetary conditions by issuing coinage. In the Dominican Republic, this had earlier precedents with French capitalists, but did not include the United States until Smith M. Weed and Charles M. Wells formed the San Domingo Improvement Company, SDIC, in 1891 in New York City, based on insider knowledge that the former company was near bankruptcy. By early 1893, the SDIC was the banker, treasurer, and financer for the Dominican Republic, and in 1897, they created a national coinage for the country. From the crude independence-era coinage issued in the name of Ferdinand VII, circa 1810 to 1820, to the 1844/48 coinage struck in the chaotic period of post-Haitian rule, to the 1877 to 1888 decimal coinage more peaceful times, the physical form of each issue demonstrates a clear departure from the previous type, seemingly getting better and better with each generation. 19th century Dominican coinage culminates with the beautifully designed and well-struck peso coinage in 1897. That's what we see here in the bottom right. While an initial glance at these latter coins may make it appear as if the Dominican Republic had fully modernized and joined the developed world, a closer look at their history reveals that the country was still in the grips of other, better-funded entities. While the official use of the term dollar diplomacy did not begin by the United States until the Taft administration from 1909 to 1913, private companies routinely inserted themselves into the monetary, fiscal, and economic policies of the Latin American nations. This trend grew exponentially throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century. Although they often presented themselves as having the ability to stabilize the region, the primary focus of these companies was on profits and monetary gain, essentially duping the national governments into giving them control of their country's finances. Since independence, profits earned at the custom houses in Puerto Plata were the primary source of revenue for the Dominican Republic. Because larger amounts of traffic would lead to an increase in revenue for itself, the government perpetually tried to promote international trade. Meanwhile, continued military efforts against Haiti and Spain often led to an imbalance in the books against the government. To make up for this, the government increasingly took on loans from European merchants. These European merchants made incredible amounts of profit as they charged high interest rates to the Dominican government. The events leading up to the coinage in 1897 began when the Dominican government received one such loan nearly 3 decades earlier. In 1869, President Buenaventura Baez secured a 4,020-pound loan from Edward Hartman and Company of London, with exorbitantly high interest rates that were felt nearly immediately, as it was the method of repayment of these loans that caused the drain on what little revenue the Dominican government could claim as profits from the custom house. It was taking decades to pay off this loan. On September 1st, 1882, Ulysses Hero became president of the Dominican Republic. While a fearless soldier, Hero was not adept to the intricacies of a national economy, let alone one already in shambles. And the situation grew from bad to worse under his administration. Because of the situation that his administration had inherited, his primary objective was to fix the economy. Because, while to his credit, he was able to finally negotiate a new deal that paid off the original Hartman loan, the terms of the deal and his handling of the 800,000 pound in finances that followed was less than exemplary. In addition to the new Westendorp loan, Hero struck other deals that directly relate to the coinage of the period. On July 26, 1889, for an example, an agreement between the Dominican government and the Sociedad de Crédit Mobiliar of Paris led to the creation of the Banco Nacional de Santo Domingo. This bank had the sole money issuing authority for the nation. In 1892, Westendorp and Company applied to 2 New York attorneys in an attempt to sell Dominican bonds to the United States government. Hero had defaulted on the payment for the previous year, and the Dutch company began to understand the mess they'd gotten themselves into. At this time, the United States was not interested in assuming any of the Dominican debt, but Secretary of State John W. Foster suggested that an American company step in to forestall French or German intervention. With this insider information, these 2 New York lawyers, Smith M. Weed and Charles W. Wells, formed the San Domingo Improvement Company, the SDIC, on April 8, 1892, and quickly bought all of the bonds from Westendorp and Company, thus assuming the debt from the loans of 1888 and 1890, as well as access to the Dominican Custom House. Despite the speed in which this transfer occurred, the Dominican government was not notified until August 2, 1892, several months later. In April 1894, a new coinage law passed that allowed for a full range of silver and gold coinage. Accordingly, when the Dominican government ordered any amount of coins from the Banco Nacional, the latter organization had 60 days to reply. in writing its intent to comply with the request. A non-communication would equate to the Banco Nacional having relinquished its sole authority to strike any issue of money on behalf of the Dominican government. This is exactly what happened in May of 1894, and the SDIC was there to deliver where the Banco Nacional could not. The Banco Nacional ended up under control of the SDIC, with Charles M. Wells, co-founder of the SDIC, becoming the general director of the bank. The first coins issued by the SDIC for the Dominican Republic were an earlier dated coin restruck for circulation. In 1888, the Dominican government issued 1 1/4 centavo and 2 1/2 centavo coins that were struck at the Paris Mint. In 1895 and 1896, to help meet the demand for the small change, the 1888 coins were restruck by the Royal Prussian Mint and Ralph Heaton and Sons, respectively, with the same date as the earlier pieces. The SDIC devalued the coins and they circulated at 1/4 and 1/2 centavo until the middle of the 20th century. Similarly, the copper 10 and 5 centavos of 1891, while not restruck, were withdrawn from circulation and reissued at a later date. When initially issued, the public refused to accept them, and on July 12, 1892, Hero removed the coins from circulation. However, because of the lack of small change, the SDIC authorized the reissuance, albeit redenominated as 5 and 2 1/2 centavos, respectively. While the April 1894 law required that the gold and silver coins were to be, quote, of the same weight and fineness as the United States coins of the same denomination, this is not what materialized. When the coins were finally produced in 1897, they were of an extremely debased 35% fine, much lower than most silver coins in production throughout the world. As such, all of the 1897 coins are technically illegal, as the lower fineness was never authorized and the monetary law of 1894 was never repealed. Because of the great difference in fineness between the 1891 and 1897 coinage, the former being 90% silver and the latter being 35% silver, the former quickly disappeared from circulation as people hoarded them. The lower fineness of these coins also affected their physical durability. This low-quality mixture of silver and copper led the coins brittle, and they sometimes would break into 2 pieces. When this happened, an individual had little other recourse than to literally nail the 2 pieces back together. So if you ever find one of these 1897 pesos that are nailed back together, you should hold on to it. It's not junk. It's actually a really, really interesting coin. These coins were known as clavados, meaning that the coin had to be repaired, but also that the recipient had been clavado, or fooled. Initially, plans were to construct a primary mint and distribution office in Santo Domingo, with agencies in Puerto Plata, Sanchez, and Santiago, but none of this materialized. Because of this, historians and numismatists had made many claims as to where the dies were produced and the coins struck. Remick and Almanzar, for instance, claimed that, quote, the dies for the 1897 coins were made in Paris, but the actual striking was done in the Philadelphia Mint. Peter Summerfield is similarly confused when he states that, quote, they were struck in Paris. The reason for this confusion lies in the A mint mark on the reverse. Initially, all aspects of production were to take place in New York City. Sometime before April 1897, the SDIC commissioned the assay office of Charles S. Platt, located at 29 Gold Street, to strike 1.7 million coins. During this time, Platt must have contacted the local die engraving community based on John Street in New York City, as Victor D. Brenner, seen here, prepared preliminary designs for the coin. By June of that year, however, production had been shifted to the United States Mint in Philadelphia. Exactly why this happened is not completely understood. It is known that prior to signing the contract, Platt did contact the United States Assay Office and the Secretary of State to receive permission to strike coinage for a foreign nation, which he apparently received as he claimed to begin production. Nonetheless, minting ultimately shifted to Philadelphia. The whole point of this, remember, was to fuel the debt cycles and spending habits of President Thiers, which were paid in both these coins and by selling bonds on the loans issued by the SDIC. By 1895, the SDIC had extended a total of 7 loans. An 8th loan that consolidated all of the earlier ones only complicated matters. However, it was this very 8th loan which included the coinage of 1897. The full extent of the loan was never carried out due to a lack of funds by the SDIC, and they became desperate. Some of their tactics to sell bonds bordered on fraudulent. For instance, many of the bondholders of this loan were poor Catholic peasants in France who believed that they had purchased securities on the Dominican religious order rather than holder of the Dominican Republic debt. As one can imagine, Thiers became a hated figure in his country. His flagrant abuse of the nation's finances, while the majority of his people suffered, was on the minds of many in the country. In addition to the insult, the populace felt the situation in the prices of day-to-day goods. As the country grew more and more dependent on foreign investment and goods, the prices of those goods continued to rise. By the time of the 1897 coinage was issued, most people wanted him gone. In 1899, July, Horacio Vaquez and Ramon Caceres assassinated Thiers. By this time, the public debt had grown to more than $34 million, compared to about $9.6 million just 11 years before. Many hoped that the assassination would actually usher in a period of stability, but the situation only continued to spiral downward, both politically and economically. As the country went through a succession of presidents, each proved to be more corrupt than the last. In December 1899, as a result, the Dominican government tried to recall the coinage of 1897, even slashing its price by 80%, attempting to buy them out of circulation at the rate of 5 pesos to the US dollar, both of these coins, the peso and the dollar, circulated in the Dominican economy until the monetary reform of 1937. Up to this point, the United States government had little interest in direct control of the Dominican government. For their part, they actually benefited from the increased presence of the United States on the island through the SDIC, but did not have to bear any of the expenses to do so, as long as the SDIC was willing. When the company needed help, the U.S. government did so, albeit discreetly. When the Dominican government complained, the only suggestion the United States government could give was for them to buy the SDIC out of existence, an impossibility for the cash-strapped government. Before this point, the dollar diplomacy of the United States existed vicariously through the SDIC. By 1905, however, with the SDIC plagued by lawsuits and the threat of European companies regaining control of the finances of the island, the United States government decided to intervene. Thank you. Preguntas. No, está una perfecta presentación.
Entendieron todo, no entendieron nada, pero estaba en España, estaba bilingüe, sí, él hizo, se tomó esa molestia.